Well, when we have just 1/10 of a second before someone who's seeing us for the very first time starts to make that valuable first impression, and they start to form all those judgment calls about how trustworthy we are, what we'd be like to work with, what we might be like as a partner, and what we might be like as a coach. But the clock is still ticking. You see, after that 1/10 of a second, within 7 seconds, their mind is pretty much made up about who we are and what we stand for. And that's why I have brought in the big guns today. Well, guys, we are interviewing Australia's #1 psychosomatics body language expert, Gillian Maddigan, who is going to share with us how we can make our best first impression. And I'm talking about person to person, and I'm talking about social media photos, book covers, business cards, websites, and also via Zoom and Facebook Lives. Because when it comes to using the digital platform, there's some other stuff going on interfering with that first impression. So Gillian, welcome. Excited to have you join us.
Hi, Tanya. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm just too excited. I'm jumping right in. And guys, look, it is great to see you too. I can see the comments already coming in. So if you are watching this live, can you put live? Let us know where you are watching from. If you're watching the replay, pop replay into the comments and let us know where you're watching from. But let's jump in. Gillian, I want to talk about that first impression. What is going on when someone who doesn't know us sees us for the first time? What are they doing and what are they basing that judgment call on?
You know, they're not actually seeing us in the moment. That's the curious thing. So when we first see someone, we may actually not see them. We may smell them first. We may see their clothes or whatever, and that color may interact with us. What relationship do we have with that color? And they also may zoom in on how you're walking, how you actually have put your jewelry on, your hair, your makeup. But those indications are actually how the reference point is in themselves, in their past. So they're not seeing you. They're looking at the references of their past and how someone else has turned up like you. And then they're going to go from that reference point and go, well, this is what happened last time. So this is how I'm going to deal with this person, even though they've never met you before.
So let's get this straight, because when I first heard you talk about this, it took me some processing. So, and I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to ask you about the different senses that we're using and how that's different in digital. But I want to go back to what you just said about that they're not really seeing you, and they kind of look at you, and without realizing it, they are figuring out who you are based on their stuff and their past experiences, which, I mean, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you even control that? Isn't that outside of your control?
Correct. So one of the big, and why people do this is because generally they're looking for the safety factor. The process is to be safe. So they're looking for indicators that will actually make them feel safe. So if you actually feel confident and a safe person to go to, guess what? They're probably going to engage with you and be comfortable in that interaction. But if you're uncomfortable with yourself and you don't feel safe, guess what? That is actually going to be what they're going to say.
I've got to jump in, right? I reckon you would be wicked, a nightmare actually to play poker with, because you would be reading all these tells. What is our body? I know you talk about body gossip. So when you talk about they might not feel safe, what might the other person be doing subconsciously? And then, of course, how do we fix that? And I just want to say hello, welcome to those who are joining us. James, welcome. And I see some other people. If you could, I just can't see your name at the moment, so if you could let me know who you are. Hi, who's joining us in Sacramento. It's great to see you too. But Gillian, this not making other people feel safe, what are we doing? And more importantly, how do we fix it?
There's nothing you can do about them, right? The only thing that you can do is to really engage with yourself. How do you feel safe in this environment? If you're nervous, your breathing actually heightens. It goes up into the higher part of your neck and your chest. It tends to be short and fast. You might smile, but it just this strain. So the muscles in your body are actually locking down. So having and even wearing clothes that you feel comfortable in is super important. So when you're getting dressed, wear the things that make you feel confident and strong and safe within yourself. Because if you're dressing up, you tend to be only a facade, and all your stuff will actually float to the surface and out you. So breathing is the first thing. And it could be you're doing this thing with your head, or you're standing off to the side, or presenting sideways. You're only giving half of yourself, talking to people with half the side of your face. Even though you might be getting eye contact, you might be dropping your eyelids or lifting them up. I can't do the lifting up one.
Well, and this is interesting, because what you're talking about is faking it till you make it, and why it doesn't work with body language. And how I see this playing out is, if you're a speaker on stage, or you're on video, you're on webinar, and you're trying to sell, and you might be smiling and making eye contact, but if there's these other levels going on, you can try to appear confident, but your body is betraying you. Is that true? And then, of course, my next question, which you're going to get a lot today, is, well, how do we fix that?
So what happens is that you start getting twitches and tics, because your conscious mind is going, no, behave, stay present, get eye contact, engage with the person. But your subconscious in the background, all your muscles are responding to the situation. So you start moving around it and clicking, and your face starts moving involuntarily. Breathe into your lower half of your body. Breathe right down into the lower part of your lungs. Pause, feel yourself, because as soon as you start rising up and holding your breath, or just gasping for breath, your body shuts down. All your peripherals actually start turning off. The oxygen to your brain, your blood supply to your brain starts to reduce down. You can't pick the words out, and you start stuttering and falling over your words, and you can't find what you want to say. So breath is the key.
And I think that's so important. I know, as a speaking coach, I talk about, before you pivot to your offer, anchor yourself, come back into yourself, take that breath. Because if you do rush into it and you trip, what can happen is the other person just gets this kind of feeling that something's not right, and maybe it's not the right time, or something's just not right, when there's something else going on. And so I know for myself as a speaker, because I've worked with you, that's why I just had to come and interview you. When I used to speak, guys, and I hope that this is helpful for you. And hey, Elaine, how are you doing? But I remember, Gillian, when we first started working together many years ago, and I would, as an empathetic person, I would often feel the energy of the room, and I would be about to pivot to my offer, and I would suddenly feel, just not good, right? And what I discovered was that I'm not feeling well was actually the energy of the people in the room. And in that moment, while I wanted to recoil and collapse away from this feeling, I needed to expand and slow down and ground myself and allow them to borrow a little bit of faith from me, and deliberately control my breathing, deliberately slow, so I'm calm. So instead of them wanting to run away from me, I'm now peaceful to be around. Giving away trade secrets here. So what happens? Well, firstly, so what you're talking about is, and I thought it was hilarious when you said, we'll often smell a person, right? And I can definitely, like, my handsome husband does wear some very nice cologne. You can certainly smell them when they walk, but that does impact on that first impression, particularly if it's not a pleasant smell, and that can be an overpowering smell. What other senses are we using when we're making that judgment call? And then how does that differ in the digital environment? Because I know that it is a whole new ball game. So let's talk about live, in person, in a room with someone. What are we making that first impression and that gut feeling on? Do I want to work with them? Do I want to hire them? Do I want to be friends with them? What are we using?
So smell, auditory, so what you're hearing. It can be the in person. It can actually be the footfall when you're walking towards someone. All these little things that you tend to tune out generally in every day. Then you have your visuals. Your visuals come online depending on their stance, their gait, what they're wearing, how they hold themselves. And I just go back to the smell. The smell actually can be several different things. There's a primordial smell of whether that person is a healthy person or are they going to be a danger because they're sick. Then they have the overlay of body expression. You know, what's the odor that's actually coming from their body. Is it attractive? Is it repelling? Is it synthetic like cigarettes or anything else like grease, or could be from their environment? Then you have the footfall, the sound of the foot, the look of the gait, the outfit that they're wearing, how they have their hair, and that's even before they've even come up and shook your hand. And then, you know, you engage, say hi. It could be the timbre of your voice, the tone, the spaces in between the words where they can actually engage with you. A lot of people will talk really, really quickly and fill up the space because they may actually be a little scared of the interaction. And if you don't leave enough space for that person to engage with you, it can actually push people away. And then when you shake your hand or you have some sort of greeting, shaking your hands at the moment is not a good thing, even an elbow or a hi, that also gives you that indication. So when you do hi and your hands are back, your fingertips are back, they also mean something. Or if you do this towards
what does that mean? Can you give us some insight? Like if my fingertips are pointed back versus like, what is a one hand hi? Is that I'm too lazy to lift up both my arms? Or like, what is the difference? Like, show us the subtleties. Like, how do I do a good hi? How do I do a good, like, I don't like it when sometimes when people have a really firm handshake, right? Like, you know, squeezing the life out of me. And then I don't like the limp handshake. But let's just go back to that high, because I think we know about handshakes. So what does the pivot of the fingers mean? What does all this mean?
This is open-hearted, right? This is quite open-hearted through the palm of your hand. These are all, this is your heart area on your hand and your identity. This is your mind. So when you do this, you're meeting them in the body, in the heart, and you're putting your fingers back and keeping your mind out of it. That's much more engaging. Whereas if I did this, it wouldn't be very inviting at all. And one-handed means, yeah, you know, you're not super excited, but it's less confrontational as well. You know, if I didn't know somebody, I'd go hi and, you know, allow that space. But if I knew someone, I went, yeah, you know, Tanya, hey, Tanya, you know, and you also where you put your hands also means something too.
Us. What does this mean? What is it?
Hi, that's, you know, your energy's up and you're high and you're fully engaged. Whereas when you go hi, it's less, it's more in the heart, it's more centered in that physical space. So the energy is a bit more grounded. Whereas if you're up here, you know, the person knows that there's already excitement on board and it may be a little bit too much, or yeah, you know, I want to be with that person. So you have to sort of read them and see how that person would engage with you. Now,
sorry, Gillian.
Yeah, so if they're a bit shy, you want to go hi like this, because that would probably freak them out. So yeah, hi.
Well, I'm going to go off track just a little bit here, because one of the other things that I know you talk about is when you are saying hi to someone and a stranger, when you understand psychosomatics, particularly as an entrepreneur or small business owner, you know the best way to communicate with someone. So you know whether to ask, how do you feel about that? What do you think about that? Can you show me what you mean with that? Can you expand a little bit on like understanding? But because I think people might think, oh, body language is interesting, and I've read a few books, but it's more than just a circus trick, right? It's a very powerful business skill, knowing not only how to present yourself and be congruent, but also how you build relationships. So can you take us through that, Gillian?
So in psychosomatics, what we do is we look at the body-mind connection and look at how people. So for me, body language is the surface. It's the engagement with the outside world. But you created that body language over time. And in psychosomatics, we look at the body-mind connection, how you created yourself from the womb with all your conditioning right up to now. So how did you develop who you are from your bone structure, your ligaments, how you flex, your ability to flex, then the muscles, the reactions that you have created over time, the tissue that covers those reactions and gives a little bit of space, or doesn't give a little bit of space because there's not much tissue, and then the skin on the surface. But all those things are being created by patterns and conditioning and genetics over your lifetime and to this moment. So when I read someone, I'm actually reading how they have created and how they interact with their outside world. So if someone has a particular feature that's quite large, it tends to be that zone that they're actually engaging with their outside world, because it's the one that they find easiest to use. So they might have large ears, they may be good listeners depending on their age. As they age, your ears still grow and it's picking up more noise. It may not be able to define it. But when you're younger and you have big ears, you tend to listen really well. Where they sit in your face will depend on what you're listening to. If you've got a large forehead, I'd be using thinking words with you and depending on what type of forehead you had, I would give you a little bit more time. If you had a forehead like mine that's up and down, I like to take time to process things, so I need the space for that to happen. But if you've got someone with a very sloped forehead, they will actually get the picture really quickly, but not retain anything. Then on to the next thing once it's done. So there's lots of different ways that you can engage. If they've got a really strong lower lip, they might love to have chat, but they may have a very tight top lip, not about themselves. So I wouldn't talk about them because that's not a muscle that they have actually learnt to use as yet. If they've got a big nose, they like to be recognized. They like information, how they go out there and get information. Your nose is your personality and your identity. So I have a distinctively significant nose. I like to put it that way. But it doesn't look that when you see me front on. But I like to know things. And Tanya has one too. She likes to know. I have a round tip. That means I like a broad view, whereas Tanya is much more direct and she likes specifics and she doesn't bend when she's looking for it. So
I just want to interrupt here because do you guys see how you can use this in communicating with people? So if you were having a sales conversation, do they need time to percolate, or are they, do they process really quickly? Do you need to give them more time to talk about themselves, or is that something that is just foreign to them? Do you need to ask them how they feel about coming and working with you, or do you want to ask them what they think about working with you? So it is just like, I could just go for hours here. And one of the things I also love too, Gillian, you talked about muscle tissue, and just how quickly the tissue bounces back also indicates how fast a person is likely to move. Now, the other cool thing here about this, and I haven't forgotten, we're going to talk about digital in just a moment. The other cool thing about this is understanding psychosomatics to complement your weaknesses with someone else's strengths, right? So based on your face, and Gillian knows this, I love to read people's eyebrows, right? I have a little bit of knowledge, so I'm incredibly dangerous. But based on the eyebrows and how far they are apart and how dense they are they slow to start, quick to start, not good finishers, strong finishers? Do they see short-term vision, medium-term vision, or long-term vision? So if you're a strong finisher but you're slow to start, it can be a really good business collaboration to be with someone who's quick out the gate, but then loses a bit of interest, and then you can finish strong for them. So this is where all this is going. So, and who said that? I want a reading. You're now big time. Absolutely. I'm going to share Gillian's details later so you guys can go and get it. It is just absolutely fascinating. But I just want to make sure, like this, it's not just entertainment. Like, it is profound. And I've had people who've observed me on sales training calls, and they'll say to me, how did you know to do that? How did you know to lean in? How did you know to back off? And it's reading the other person to assist them to understand them. So let's talk about, Gillian, let's talk about digital, because all of those wonderful things we're using in the real life, even though we're still peppering it with our own story, all that goes out, most of it goes out the window when we go to digital, when we go to video, when we go online, when we go to Zoom. What happens?
The only things that disappear actually are smell, because and touch is depends if you're a touchy-feely kind of person. Touch still exists. So even though you can't physically touch that person, you have this reference library inside you of what people feel like. So when you see a particular texture of skin, or you can see their pores, you can see whether they're sweating or if they're, look a bit dry, you're already actually going, oh yeah, that's how that person does that. And you're doing it unconsciously. So in the digital world, you rely a lot on visuals and auditory, and also thinking about what they're saying and what they're doing in front of you. And you have the time for that because some of your senses are now, muted a little bit. So
everything's magnified, Gillian? Everything's magnified because you're focused. So it's more visual, more auditory?
Well, there's less stimulation. So I think there's more focus rather than magnification. I think there's more focus and there's more specific referencing to your past. So you're no longer in physical danger. That is reduced. But now you may be emotional danger or mental danger of being doing something that you may not do in person. You can see that with social media. That actually happens, that people will do things that they won't do in person, but they will do online, which is quite strange. Is
that why people hate watching themselves back on video? Pretty much.
Because they can't reference some of their physiology when they're on video, all of a sudden now they're watching themselves and feeling everything that they didn't feel at the time. Well, they didn't think they felt at the time. And they're fully immersed in the experience. And now they don't have to worry about the content. So they're starting to look at all the little details that they could change, or all the little details that aren't right. So this happens with beautiful people too.
Good to know. Good to know they suffer. It wouldn't be fair otherwise.
Well, really balanced people with very balanced faces or very balanced bodies are very attractive to the eye. But
I
after
know
a
you love
while,
The Rock. I know you love The Rock. Why?
I do love The Rock.
Because he's so balanced.
He is. He's very balanced. And so, but then the nature of humans is to look for the flaws, because if something is perfect, then I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect, and if I'm not perfect, I can't feel a reference in you that's in balance. So I'm looking for the flaws. This is just nature. We're looking for where the flaws are, because perfection is a little scary.
So, what's your top tip on reading nonverbal communication if you've been on video? What's your top? How do you get better?
The best thing to do is watch your video 2 or 3 days later when your emotion is out of it, and you can actually view it without being too immersed in it. It becomes a movie, and then you can critique it in a particular way. And the other thing is get feedback from people. Actually get live feedback. How was that for you? How did it feel? Did it look good? What did you think about it? Was there any things that you would change? And be open to the feedback, because you don't know what your audience is experiencing. You can only know what you're experiencing in the moment, especially on digital. Digital, I highly recommend that you go back and watch it like a third person, like a movie. How does that make you feel when you watch that video? What is coming up for you when that video is on? Do you like that person that's in front of you? Because for me, psychosomatics is about knowing your own communication, which allows you to recognize that other people communicate differently from you, because too many people communicate from their style.
I think that's such an important point. It's such an important point. Like, for instance, I'm a thinker, right? So if you knew that, because you knew how to read my face, you would come up to me and you say, "Hey, Tanya, what do you think about that?" And we could have a conversation. But if you said, "Tanya, how do you feel about that?" I'd be like, I don't know. Like, it would be a really awkward conversation that I wouldn't want to have. But that's that power of communication, is knowing how to have that, so you can communicate not on your style. It's kind of like the love language, right? If anyone's read Love Languages, we tend to communicate through our love language, and then the other person feels unloved because you weren't speaking their love language. So it's all about learning others. But tell me, because I know that I do this a lot, and this was your tip to me. No, we're not going to talk about more Tanya faults. I'm talking about getting better. Watching the video with the sound turned off, and then playing it without watching it, but listening to what your voice sounds like, because that's also really great training to be a more engaging guest or host on a podcast. What happens, Gillian, when you shut one of those digital communication avenues down, and what can be learnt from going and watching that video with the sound turned off, and then vice versa?
So the really curious thing is, I'm not sure about you, Tanya, but definitely with me, when I watch a video without the sound, I remember what the content is. So if I've already delivered it, or if I've already seen it once before, so if I'm reviewing someone else's video for them, for their body language, then I will actually watch it, turn the sound off, watch it again, turn the sound back on, and turn the video off, and listen to it and go, okay, so what was the differences between? Were they the same, or was there a difference? How congruent are the words with the actions? And where was there a pause in flow, or like this? And then there was a start again. And I'd ask, what was happening inside you at that time where the pause happened. So when you look at it, you go, okay, hang on a second. I remember what was happening then. I was actually trying to remember my script instead of just letting it flow. So engaging with both of those, turning one off and then listening again, to it and then watching it again, you're watching it 3 times, so you actually know the content. You know the content and how it's engaged you. So that's how I do it with people. How do you do it, Tanya?
What do you mean? How do I do it?
Does it have a feeling and response when you review it?
I do the sound off. Yeah, like when I watched Harry Megan's interview, I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, I know what's going on here. Sound off. I know I'm just watching I'm purely watching nonverbal. And every now and I'll turn it on. I'm like, there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect. Yeah. So I love watching it. And it's interesting because we were talking about first impressions, is that most videos come up without the sound on these days, right? And so when that video comes on my feed, be it Instagram, IGTV or Facebook, if I don't like what I see with the sound off, I don't click and turn the sound on. Like I'm literally gone in that second. Gillian, what are some
just tell you before you go to that.
Yes.
A lot of people actually watch video with captions.
Yeah, so 95%. Great point.
Yeah, and so they may never ever hear your voice. Just to keep that in mind. They may never turn on the sound. They may watch the entire video with captions.
Well, that could be a good thing, because someone asked the question earlier, Tanya, are you living in America now? You sound really American. I am living in America, and it's all my Aussie friends' fault that I'm losing my Australian accent. And my other problem is I'm a parrot. So if I'm around a British person or a Scottish person, I will start mimicking. It's really embarrassing. So I am living in America, and all my Aussie friends, you need to talk to me more. Elaine said sometimes firstly she said she's noticed that truly photogenic people tend to have larger heads relative to their shoulders, and that she always looks like a pinhead. Is that true? Have you noticed that, Gillian?
That may be attractive to you.
Oh, Elaine's got a type. We just nailed it.
We do. We all have a type. It's either something we don't have, or it's something that we love about ourselves and we recognize in others.
There we go. Oh, I love that. You can see why I love hanging out with Gillian. When we were in Australia, we go to lunch and just with the sound off, it was so much fun. And Elaine also said sometimes she'll deliberately pause the way she would during a conversation to show that she's finding the right word in the moment. I mean, I'm a big, like, you'll see me look off, right, to the side. And I like to do that because this is a casual chat, casual interview. And I think that it's natural to, like I'm thinking, it's natural to sort of do that and to take a breath instead of this, and I am a fast talker, but I do try to slow down. But instead of this kind of, spraying out. But Elaine says, she says, look at the movie stars. They tend to have larger heads. I don't know. We'll have to source that. I mean, when I think of The Rock, he's got a big body and a big head. I guess Daniel Craig has a big head, doesn't he, on a little body? But Elaine, we might have the same type. My husband has a big head too, and I know he's watching.
Daniel Craig actually doesn't have a big head. For the size of his shoulders, right. He carries his head forward.
And what does that mean? I know what that means, but can you share what that means?
So your mind is actually leading the story, leading your party along. You're not embodied. And when you see him play roles that are really very emotionally engaging, his head is actually back.
It's a great tip for coaches.
Yeah. So
bring back.
How far away is your client or your person, or is the person that you're talking to out of their body and disengaged from their emotions? So they're feeding their mind, but they may not be an action taker because they're so far away from the physicality of themselves. So when you're looking at someone, head position, arm position, what are they doing? Are they doing these things with their shoulders? Are they turning? But
you can help them too, right? Like if you see someone, if you're trying to talk to someone and they might not be getting something, or they might even be in like that panic mode as a coach or sales call, whatever, you could notice that and help them come back into themselves so that they can actually process information.
Yeah, and just back to what Elaine was saying about the pause, every culture actually has a way to pause. Some people say some people say ha, some people, there's a deep breath, a look away, depending on the person. But there needs to be a pause in the engagement, because the other person needs time to process and digest what they're actually consuming. You can't just keep consuming. You'll just turn into a huge balloon, and eventually explode in many, many different ways. So in doing that, coming back to that pause, taking the time to breathe, look away, disengage, re-engage, disengage, re-engage, which then allows you, when someone is, getting closer and closer to the screen and closer to your space, you can actually pull slightly back, lean into your hips, breathe for them, relax, do the opposite of their posture. Because if you're in the lead mode, if you're the leader anyway, they're going to follow you. So in that mirroring their position, creating rapport, you can be the leader with the body language that you present.
Now, I'm going to come into common mistakes made on video in particular in a minute. And I'm going to talk about profile photos. I mean, we typically go for 45 minutes, but you and I could literally take the whole afternoon. We're not going to go that long, but we will run a little bit longer because I want you guys to really get some of the gold. But you did just mention the gunslinger. So Gillian just talked about like leaning back and hands on hips. You often see people do this on stage, and I know you call it the gunslinger. It's like the sheriff's in town. What is that? And who knows what I'm talking about when I talk about the gunslinger? Gillian, maybe you can explain the body language a little bit more so people can get a visual on it.
So either their hands are right smack bang where their guns would be if they were wearing gun belt, two guns on either side, or they've got their hands on their hips and they're just taking the space and they're shooting from the hip. Everything is like bang, 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 bang. And you don't even have time to dodge sometimes. So that posture can be really put everyone on the defensive because they actually don't know where the next shot is coming from, and they don't know if they're going to get shot or they're going to have the ability to dodge, which is not such a good thing if you're wanting the audience to engage. It's a really old style of delivering information from stage. It's like you, and there's people out there that's how they do things. But if you're not in that kind of, if that's not your personality, I would not recommend you utilizing that, especially if your audience is sensitive and emotional, and it works really well with those. It's a bit like those loud ads that you used to get on TV. Come here, buy this. It's very similar. So that gunslinger, and you're waiting for that next shot each time, shooting from the hip.
Yes, if you have a purpose-driven, heart-centered audience and you start gunslinging, then you're going to start, bodies are going to start dropping, right, or leave the room. And I know, we'll come into mistakes, and I know there's all kinds of things in terms of communication, where you place your hands in terms of blocking your language, and it's a whole other conversation, right? But if you are a speaker, I do encourage you to connect with Gillian, and you're doing a lot of stuff on video as well. The power of networking, but in particular, when you're a speaker and you're doing a lot on video, things that you are doing, like, for instance, tell us about some common mistakes, Gillian. Like, what about, just tell us about some common mistakes and what it means. Like, a head tilt one way is different to a head tilt the other way. And I think, what do you call this one? The parrot.
Yeah, bird.
Birding.
So it's almost like there's two different types. So there's the one that's listening to themselves, and then there's the one that's listening with one side of themselves. So you're only getting half of the conversation. So one side, your right side, is your masculine, analytical, outgoing side. So all the information is going outside. And your left side is your feminine, intuitive side. It's your inner talk and your inner engagement, how you receive in the world. So if you're presenting one side of you, if you're presenting that feminine side, you're actually not listening with balance. You're only listening with your inner world and how you're receiving information. If you're only doing it from the masculine side, you're only listening for the analytics and what you can do. Whereas if you're listening for both, with looking straight at the person and engaging with them, then there you're getting both points of experience, how you can engage with them and how you're receiving the information. So when you tilt to the side, the person actually may be listening to their own inner self. They're listening with their emotion, but they're also self-analyzing and engaging with themselves.
So they're not really in the present. They're not really in the now.
No.
There's a lot of profile photos with head tilts. What will that mean if someone comes to check you out on social media and they see the head tilt? Because that can also come across as not being sure of yourself as well. Like, because these images that we make in that 1/10 of a second, which we also put into our own story into that, where there's a little bit of a head tilt or some collapsing body language, or maybe overcompensating, too much, compensation, it can really repel the viewer. The person checking you out. So what are your tips for that in terms of social? Tanya says she tips her head, and yes, there will be a replay, guys. What are your tips for having a powerful, balanced, impactful social media profile photo?
What is your intent? So if you saw my shot that Tanya used for this, the advertising on this, I'm leaning in and I'm slightly turned my head to the side, because I use that one for people who don't really know me. People who know me know I can shoot direct and can be sharp and specific. And when I look down the camera, I can be very direct. So that can be quite confrontational. So that shot is used, it's an old shot, but it was an intentional one. It was to invite someone in and allow them to feel a little comfortable, because I am tipping to the right, and that allows that feminine side to come out, and I've got a coffee in front of me. That is also inviting. So what is your intent with the photograph? Yeah. Don't let the photographer make you do things you don't feel comfortable doing. They have a way they've been taught. It is not necessarily your story. And if it's your story you want to deliver, you need to be in charge. And that means taking 50 shots and getting them to give you those 50 shots, so you can decide on what the story is that you want to deliver, depending on who you're giving it to.
Yeah. And they will, I mean, shots that I was taking before I had an understanding of psychosomatics are very different to the ones after. And I had my photographer want me to do certain things, and I just said, I'm not doing that. That's I'm not doing it. And I didn't explain myself. I just said, I'm not doing that. No, that's not me. No, because as Gillian was saying, what's your intent? And also, what's your audience? So my photos can be more direct, because I work in media and speaking and video and publicity. And so it's communication, and it's very direct. I really loved how you broke down that photo of yourself, Gillian, because it is a friendly photo, but your mind doesn't necessarily know why that photo is friendly, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are some other things? Because I'd love to give people some practical information. And for those of you that got to go, guys, I am actually just going to drop up Gillian's contact details so that you can go and have a really quick chat with Gillian with her. So I think there's a free strategy call, Gillian.
Yep.
30 minutes, 15 minutes, something like 30 minutes. What a gold mine. So go and grab that. And if you have time, keep hanging around because you're going to get some different stuff here. What are some other things to be mindful of? I mean, I know for me, I constantly have to remind myself because I get so excited, right? So I'll creep in and creep in and creep in. But speaking of creeping, there's another one that a lot of people do. And
no one needs to see your nostrils.
What's going on with this? When you see someone do this in a Zoom call on a video, what are they actually doing?
Yeah, they're being quite forceful. Like they're taking their mind out of it and they're being really physical. So this is what you need to do. It's almost like they're being challenged. But in them being challenged and in their delivery, it disconnects them from their emotion, which can disconnect them from their audience. But it also can actually put their audience into rebellion because now you're going, come on, give it to me here. And then you can get hecklers because of it, because you're actually putting yourself out there and going, bring it. Bring it on. I've got all the answers. Now, when you don't have all the answers, it can be very, very confronting, but not only confronting, but debilitating in your delivery, because now you have to deal with the energy that's coming at you rather than with you.
And it's a defense mechanism too, like it's a protection thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So they disconnect from all this emotional vessel that is their body that has all their memories. So as soon as you do that, you start to disconnect from your physical body. You also start to shut down your breathing, and then your brain starts to suffer because it's not getting, again, enough blood and oxygen. So then you're in flight mode. You're either in fight, flight mode because you've put yourself out there on a ledge that doesn't really have much support.
What would your advice be to people who, might be thinking about working with someone that might be like a collaboration, a joint venture partnership, for instance? It might be hiring a coach or even bringing a client on board. Are there any kind of ground rules you can share with us to keep them safe from, or rather having their expectations in alignment with what they see?
Well, one of the biggest things is understanding yourself. I'm a big believer in know your own stuff, know what your talents are, know what your faults, not necessarily faults, but it may be that you haven't actually grown that muscle, or you're not even interested in growing that muscle. Looking for the gaps as well as your talents, your experience, and knowing yourself. So how far can you go? Because then when a prospective client or a prospective partnership turns up, you know where your gaps are and you can actually engage with that person. One of the biggest problems is that people go into business with themselves. They go into business with a person that's just like them. So guess what? Stuff gets done in one area and the other areas, no one does it because the both of you or the three of you or however many in the group are working on the things that you do well. And everything else is getting left behind or not touched at all. And then eventually the relationship just collapses. So know where you are, what you're good at, but also know what you're not good at. Because really knowing yourself, then you can find the gaps and fill them.
I love that. I thought that was hilarious that people go into business with themselves and then all the stuff that they all love doing gets done. But then the stuff that they hate, well, none of that gets done because the other people they brought in hate it just like they do.
Yeah.
Guys, if you have a question for Gillian, love for you to drop it in because we are going to be winding up very, very soon. And I'm just going to I'll just show you again how you can go and spend a little bit more time with Gillian. And I encourage you to do so. Can you undo a bad first impression?
If you have time. You may never, ever get to engage with that person again. But let me tell you, they will tell many other people that would engage with you about you. So turn up as yourself. My recommendation is wherever you go, be who you are. Because if you don't be who you are, if you pretend to be who you are, you'll give this false impression. They'll go tell someone else. The other person will meet you and go, "What? Who are they talking about?" Because now you're a different person that's turning up. Just be who you are, because you can't change how someone else experiences you. But if you're comfortable with who you are and how you turn up, people who really like who you are will work with you. People who don't won't. But then you don't have to go through that process of sifting through who really sees you, who really doesn't see you, who saw your facade, who wanted to work with your facade, and who wanted to work with the real you. Just be yourself. And if you don't like yourself, do something about it.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting too, like I've talked a lot about application of this in business, because obviously, you know, those of you who are watching, you know, most of you, if not all of you, are a small business owner or an entrepreneur. But it's also so important in other areas like family, understanding your children and your partner. And I know, Gillian, because you've read, I think it's like 12,000 faces and 11,000 tattoos. I might have them round the wrong way. My apologies. But I know that you also uncover hidden talents in people. How on earth do you see, what is that superpower? How do you do that?
Well, some people have just been taught that this is what they are all their life. They've been taught this is what you are. This is who you are. This is how you do things. You're really good at that. So they've never really delved into who they are as a person. They've lived a life of who they have been told they are. So when I'm looking at a face, I'm looking for what makes them unique, what engages my eye and my senses that jumps out. And when I read a face, I go, "How did you know that?" I've never told anyone that. I said, "Well, your story's on your face. I can see it there." And if people took the time, they would see it too. Most people read faces. They just don't know what they're reading. So the idea of learning how to read what you see, because everybody's story's there. So when I look at someone, I'm looking for the thing that catches my eye. What is it that catches my eye? So when I look at Tanya, it's her nose. It's like she's so like down the line. It's engaging, and then she's got these sparkly eyes that go. The personality is your nose is your personality, and your eyes are your heart. So it's like, let me get my nose in there and find out what's going on, and then let me bring it into my heart and go, "Ooh, yeah, now I know the questions to ask." So
and blink rates. You often said to me, "You process really, really quickly," and I'm like, "Well, I do, but how do you know that?" And you're like, "I can see your processor at work."
The digital.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm like, I don't know how I feel about having my story all across my face. You know, I like reading other people's stories, but I have a thin upper lip, Gillian. I don't.
Oh, it's improving. It's improving.
Naturally. Couple of questions. There were some amazing comments. People saying they'd love to learn more on this. And there's all kinds of ways you can work with Gillian, by the way. I mean, I've worked with Gillian privately, had her help me on video. When I first started doing videos, everyone hated it because I was news journalist Tanya and I was very serious. So Gillian helped me bring out actual Tanya, and that as well, and also on stage. But also she has programs. She has online programs, of which I've done as well. I have to warn you guys, this stuff is addictive. Once you go down this path, it is fascinating and so powerful in your business, so incredibly powerful. And we've had that coming in, Julie, in the comments, such powerful information. Would love to learn more about this. And I'm just going to read Elaine's question, and then I'm going to say we're going to close off. So if you have another question, quickly type it in now and let us know. But Elaine said, what is a great question? What is the best physical posture to immediately show that you're safe and interested? And Elaine, interested in what? In movie stars with big heads and small shoulders? And what are we interested in?
And that's exactly right. You know, it comes down to intent. What is your intention in that moment? Is it to engage a client? Is it to engage a customer? Is it to find a partner? You know, what is it that you're doing? Know what you're at, why you're there for the start. Because when you know why you're there, it creates this environment of safety because you're understanding yourself. You're supporting your purpose in that moment. So your head is in, you can see your chest in your peripheral vision, your knees are nice and relaxed and ready, your hands are open, they're not crossed, they're not, your shoulders aren't doing this, they're nice and open, your chest is open. Because now you're feeling balanced. The breath is flowing evenly in and out of your body. It's not or almost non-existent. Some people don't hardly breathe visually at all, which is also a little disconcerting for the person on the other side because they don't know if you're alive and you're going to keel over at any moment. So when you're creating rapport with someone, matching their posture and then relaxing into your own, relaxing into those shoulders, feeling the softness in your body, but the strength inside you. When you feel safe, they feel safe.
And I think it's also, Elaine, understanding that other person, right? So how do you make someone else feel safe? Well, for some people, they might be touchy, like they might have a big heart, which you can tell on their face. So you might go in for a hug, but if you did that to someone else, that would not make them feel safe, no matter how safe and secure you felt in you. So understanding how to read the other person for the best way to make them, help them feel safe. So
a little tip. If
great.
their feature is small, so every feature represents a part of a person. If a feature is small, don't go there. They haven't developed that muscle. They haven't developed that environment. So this is your mental, emotional, and your physical. That's what Tanya's doing.
Head, heart, body,
physical,
physical.
Yes.
Yeah, physical.
Yeah, physical action. So keep that in mind. Your eyes are your heart. Your ears is how you listen to the world. This is your personality and your identity. This is your fun park. I call it the fun park. Sensuousness of life, the taste of life. And then you've got your feet. So this is your head, your arms, heart, personality and identity, where your lungs are, sensuality, sexuality. This is your tummy, your sexual organs. These are your legs, and how you hear the world, how you experience the world through sound. If you've got small ears, get in front of them. They're not listening with your ears. Don't use listening language.
Yeah, and just to whet your appetite more, the jaw, the shape of the face, whether they're humanitarians, how much depth they have, how much sticky, like it's just, Gillian, thank you so much. I know we're going to have you back. I mean, Gillian and I have private conversations behind the scene. Anytime there's a political debate, I'm on her. What do you think? Rah, rah, rah. Anytime there's some kind of Senate inquiry, I'm like, what did you think? Were they telling the truth? So I'm not even going to ask if you'll come back because I know you'll come back. I'm telling you. I'm telling you, you'll be back. Guys, did you enjoy that? Did you love that? I encourage you. Gillian, you are just so good at what you do. And, I'm so blessed to have you as part of my community, as part of one of the experts that my community have access to, my students, and also, of course, everyone here in the Facebook group as well. Thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time. Guys, show Gillian the love. Like, open up those hearts. And give her a big thank you. And Gillian is in our community, so if you have a question and you're watching the replay, please leave that question. She'll be sure. I'll tap her on the shoulder and be sure to get her to come back and answer that for you. And for those of you who are just joining us, if you want to connect with Gillian, she has an opportunity to come through to a free chat with her, have a chat about what it is that you want to achieve, what you're looking to do, and Gillian can have a chat to you about the best way that she can help you uniquely for you. So, Gillian, thank you so much for your time. Guys, take it easy wherever you are. Stay safe, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, Tanya.
Pleasure.